Have you ever thought that maybe the sole survivor in Fallout 4 is the first main character in the whole series who is not really human? What if one of Shaun's parents was not a person but a synth created by the Institute? At first this sounds crazy. The game begins before the Great War, long before the Institute even existed, but the more you look at the details, the more you notice strange hints, hidden connections and holes in the story. Now it's time to finally answer the question, is the main character really a synth or not? Today you will learn, what are the chances that the sole survivor is actually a synth, why Shaun staged the thawing of the sole survivor in Vault 111, what is strange about the kidnapping of Shaun, and why the sole survivor can use VATS before even finding the Pip-Boy. Let's start with the moment where this whole theory begins.
Tell me, are you a synth?
In the back of my mind, I've always suspected.
That's what I thought.
When you arrive in Far Harbor and talk to Dima for the first time, he asks if you are a synth. The sole survivor answers in a very honest way. But here's the strange part. Maybe it is just a small mistake from the developers, but the option I am a synth is placed at the bottom of the dialogue wheel. In Fallout 4, the bottom option is almost always the most honest or the most correct choice. Here are some examples from the beginning of the game.
Are you from a local settlement?
I'm from Vault 111.
You're a vault dweller? Most people wouldn't admit to such a thing. I appreciate your honesty.
I should have listened to Mama Murphy all along. Pretty nice place she's found for us. I think we could settle down here. Make it a place to call home. What do you think?
Yeah, I used to like living here before the war. I lived here over 200 years ago. I was frozen or something for most of it. Just woke up a little while ago.
Damn, like one of those old pre-war ghouls.
As you can see, the bottom choice is always the straight, truthful answer. So why is the I am a synth option in the same place? Of course, this alone proves nothing, but let's look at the other pieces of the puzzle. Another clue also appears in the talk with Dima.
If you don't mind, what's the first thing you can remember?
I remember being in my house the day the bombs fell. We ran to the vault. We were frozen. I was the only survivor.
No memories before then? Just a single day, and then waking up alone?
For some reason, the sole survivor cannot remember anything except the day the bombs fell. And memory problems are exactly what the Institute gave to synths, so it would be easier to control them and erase dangerous information.
So you think this institute is responsible?
Well, they're the boogeymen of the Commonwealth. Worst of all, no one knows why they do it, what their plan is, or where they are. Not even me, and I'm a synth myself.
You don't know anything about them? Really?
Some kind of security setting strips or blocks out those memories.
But was the sole survivor already a synth at the very beginning of Fallout 4? I think we can say no. At the start of the game, the hero is human because synths were created only after the war. So the only possible time for a replacement was during the second freezing in Vault 111. At that moment, the Vault staff were already gone, and no one could stop the swap. When the sole survivor wakes up, the whole vault has no power and only their cryopod is still working. Everyone else is dead. This is very strange. Why is the sole survivor the only one alive? The answer can be found in Kellogg's memories.
I never knew why we didn't just refreeze the rest of them, but we had our orders.
Kellogg wonders why they couldn't just turn the cryopods back on and save the other Vault people. But the order was different. The Institute only cared about the baby and his parents because the baby had perfect DNA. If something went wrong, the parents had very similar DNA and could be used instead of Shaun. That is why the Institute called them the backup option.
I'm not giving you Shaun!
At least we still have the backup.
Everything else in Vault 111 was worthless to them, so they let everyone else die. The Institute always destroyed what it didn't need. The only valuable things here were Shaun and his parents. Later we learned that Shaun's DNA had already served its purpose. After that, the backup option was no longer useful. The sole survivor also became a possible danger to the Institute. Of course, they would search for their son and maybe even find the Institute itself. So it was easier to kill the sole survivor than to risk problems later. The Institute destroyed whole settlements and replaced important people. So why wouldn't they also kill the sole survivor with just one command? But here comes the question. Why would Shaun want to kill his last living parent? Even if he was cold, this would look strange. Shaun did not like that Kellogg killed one of his parents.
Your mother. She never got to see you grow up?
Yes. I do regret never having known her.
And he didn't even know the other one was alive until he became director. Shaun says he wasn't sure what happened to the sole survivor after they were released from the vault, so it is very unlikely he would risk killing his real parent. The answer is simple: the sole survivor was probably killed long before Shaun became director. Listen again to what Kellogg says in his memory.
I guess the old man didn't want so many loose ends. Too bad he left alive the one person he shouldn't have.
He mentions an old man who gave the order to kill everyone in the vault, except for one parent as a backup. It is clear this old man was the former director of the Institute, who was not a kind person. Most likely, when he saw that Shaun's DNA was enough, he gave the order to kill the parent too. Shaun only learned about this later when he became director. And here is something else. In one of the terminals you can find Shaun's notes, and they are very strange. The wait continues. IO can only confirm sightings outside Vault 111 and again in Diamond City sometime later. What that means, I'm not sure. Will we actually meet? Was this all for nothing? What exactly was all for nothing? Was it that Shaun pressed one button to release the sole survivor? Or maybe the experiment that Shaun talks about on the roof of the Institute was not so simple?
You let me out.
Yes, it was my decision. Well, I suppose I wanted to see what would happen. An experiment of sorts.
Maybe he secretly created a perfect copy of his parent and placed it back into the vault, maybe even with Kellogg's help. But why would it have to be secret? Keep this question in mind, I will come back to it later. Now, I want to draw your attention to one more detail. Unlike most members of the Institute, Shaun seemed to feel much more sentimental about synths. For the others, they were nothing more than machines.
A synth might look like a man or a woman, but it isn't.
But in one of his terminals, Shaun uses a very different word. He calls them beings. Today, our third-generation creations are truly synthetic beings, so the designation synth seems more appropriate than ever. With each new generation, Shaun's feelings towards synths grew warmer. But if we accept the theory that the sole survivor was a synth, then he was never Shaun's real parent, and this puts everything into place. Shaun spoke coldly and kept his distance not because he had no emotions, but because he knew standing before him was not a parent of flesh and blood, but only a copy, a synthetic version, created by the Institute. That is why his behavior seems so mixed. On one hand, a precious being, on the other, not a real family. And that is also why his reaction is so strange when the sole survivor says they still love him.
Shaun, you need to know, I still love you.
I can see that you do. It's remarkable.
He is surprised that this parent still holds feelings for their child, even though for Shaun, the real mother or father had died long ago, while for the hero, the decades in the cryopod passed in an instant. At first, it looks strange, but it makes much more sense if the hero really is a synth. This is also why Shaun sent him out into the Commonwealth, even though he wasn't sure the hero would survive.
I'll admit, when I had you released from Vault 111, I had no expectations that you'd survive out here.
He would never risk that with his real parent, but with a synth, he could, and it was not just a whim. In truth, Shaun was testing the newest version of a synth, the one that is the main character. This explains why the hero was able to defeat Kellogg so easily. If he was only a normal human, he would have had no chance. But instead, Shaun arranged his revenge through someone else's hands.
It's no coincidence your path crossed his. It seemed a fitting way to allow us, to have some amount of revenge.
And don't forget the coursers. The player defeats them far too easily for a simple survivor. When Shaun saw that the hero had passed every test, he named him the new director of the Institute. In fact, that was his plan from the very start, to give power to a family member carrying his DNA, even if it was inside the body of a synth. For Shaun, this was the perfect way to pass power to a more advanced being. Everyone would think his parent was in charge and no one would ask questions. That is most likely why he kept it secret. Maybe only a few trusted people knew, because most Institute members would not like the idea of being ruled by a synth. They were already unhappy that Shaun's parent became director, and if they learned he was also a synth, even one more advanced than the third generation, their anger would be much worse. And yes, if the main character is really a synth, then he is not just an ordinary third generation model. To see this, we have to look at VATS. Have you ever thought about what it stands for? You may have noticed this if you paid attention to the loading screens in Fallout 4, where it says VATS, or the Vault-Tec Assisted Targeting System, is an advanced combat technology whose developmental origins have been lost to time. In other words, this was a Vault-Tec invention, and it only works through the Pip-Boy. In every Fallout game, this feature appears only after the hero gets a Pip-Boy, except in Fallout 4. And here is one more small but curious detail. When I recorded this footage, I found out that if you turn on the free camera during the scene where Kellogg takes Shaun, you can see neurons in the background, the same ones as in the memory sequences. A small thing, but interesting. And now, listen carefully to an entry found in a terminal in the robotics division. Overriding directive to not alter our synth's basic functioning notwithstanding, Father has granted clearance for a rather unique project. In select Gen 3 units, the synthetic brain is indeed capable of accepting specific enhancements to the visual cortex, basal ganglia, and right parietal cortex. The result is substantially improved combat effectiveness due to two factors: an increased understanding of weapon accuracy to the extent that the combatant can actually visualize the percentage of effectively hitting targets or smaller areas on those targets, an altered sense of perception that mimics the effect of slowing or even stopping time. Recommend we commence surgery and field trials on appropriate operatives in the near future. Shaun allowed this experiment for a special project. And what was that project? Most likely, a synthetic copy of one of his parents. From the very beginning of the game, the main character can use VATS, even without a Pip-Boy, and this, according to the text, is possible only for a few synths of the third generation. Not even most coursers can do it. That means the main character really is unique. Maybe he is an improved version of the third generation, or even the first step toward the fourth. Maybe he is not just a synth, but in some way an advanced clone of Shaun's parent, completely organic with no mechanical synth components. That also explains why Father cannot shut him down with the recall code if the hero chooses to destroy the Institute. Considering everything, I see two possible theories. The first theory: the main character was replaced by a synth because a normal human simply cannot use VATS without a Pip-Boy, and with the terminal record about this kind of experiment, the chance of coincidence is almost zero. The second theory: it is not really about being a synth or not. Bethesda left these details on purpose to make players doubt, but honestly, using VATS without a Pip-Boy feels like Bethesda went a bit too far. So everyone can have their own truth. For some, the sole survivor is a synth, for others, a soldier, or just an ordinary lawyer.